Zoe Martinez smoothed down her simple black dress for the 10th time as she stood outside the gleaming Manhattan skyscraper. The invitation in her hand felt heavy, though it was just paper. Her friend Emma had insisted she attend this art exhibition opening, claiming it would be good for her career at the small gallery downtown. The elevator whisked her up to what she thought was the 15th floor, but when the doors opened, she stepped into a world that took her breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across marble floors, and elegantly dressed people moved like dancers through the space, champagne glasses catching the light. This wasn't the modest art opening she expected. The women wore gowns that cost more than her monthly rent, and the men's watches probably cost more than her car. Zoe's heart raced as she realized she was in the wrong place entirely. She turned to leave, but bumped directly into a server carrying a tray of champagne. The golden liquid splashed across her dress and onto the floor, creating a small puddle that reflected the chandelier above. "Oh no, I'm so sorry," Zoe gasped, grabbing napkins from the server's tray to clean up the mess. "Please don't worry about it," came a warm voice beside her. These things happen. Zoe looked up to see a man kneeling beside her, helping with the cleanup. He had kind brown eyes and dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it. Unlike the other men in their perfectly pressed tuxedos, he seemed relaxed, genuine. "I don't think I belong here," Zoe whispered, suddenly feeling embarrassed by the attention their small accident had drawn. "Neither do I most of the time," he replied with a smile that made her stomach flutter. "I'm Nolan." "Zoe," she said, accepting his outstretched hand. His touch was warm and sent tiny electric shocks up her arm, the dance that changed everything. The orchestra began playing a waltz, and couples moved toward the center of the room. Zoe watched them with fascination. She'd only seen dancing like this in movies. "Would you like to dance?" Nolan asked, appearing beside her again after disappearing to get her a glass of water. "I don't know how to dance like that," Zoe admitted, nodding toward the elegant couples spinning across the floor. "I'll teach you," Nolan said simply. "It's easier than it looks." Before she could protest, he was leading her to a quieter corner of the dance floor. His hand settled on her waist, while the other took her hand gently. "Just follow my lead," he murmured, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Something clean and expensive. As they began to move, Zoe forgot about everything else. The way Nolan looked at her made her feel like she was the only person in the room. His eyes never left hers as he guided her through the steps, patient when she stumbled, encouraging when she got it right. "You're a natural," he said as she spun, under his arm, her dress flaring out around her. "You're a good teacher," she replied, surprised by her own boldness. They danced through 3 songs, lost in their own world. Other couples moved around them, but Zoe barely noticed. There was something magical about the way Nolan held her, protective yet gentle, confident yet respectful. Secrets in the garden. When the music slowed, Nolan led her through glass doors onto a terrace garden. The city sparkled below them, millions of lights creating a carpet of stars. The night air was cool against Zoe's warm cheeks. "This is incredible," she breathed, leaning against the railing. "I've lived in New York for 3 years and never seen a view like this." "Where do you usually spend your time?" Nolan asked, genuinely curious. "Brooklyn, mostly. I work at a small art gallery in Williamsburg. We show local artists, people trying to make their dreams come true." She paused, suddenly self-conscious. "What about you? What do you do?" Nolan hesitated for a moment. "I work in technology. Software development mostly." It wasn't exactly a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. Nolan Richards was the founder and CEO of Technova, a company worth billions. But something about Zoe made him want to be just Nolan, not the billionaire everyone wanted something from. "That sounds interesting," Zoe said. "Are you working on anything exciting?" "Always," Nolan smiled. "But right now I'm more interested in learning about you. What kind of art do you love? They talked for an hour, sharing stories and dreams. Zoe told him about growing up in a small town in Ohio, how she'd saved every penny to move to New York and pursue her passion for art. Nolan found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, about feeling lonely despite being surrounded by people, about wanting to make a real difference in the world. The reality check. Nolan, there you are. A woman's voice cut through their conversation like a knife. Everyone's been looking for you. A stunning blonde in a silver gown approached them, her smile perfectly practiced. She looked at Zoe with barely concealed dismissal. Victoria, Nolan said, his tone suddenly formal. I was just getting some air. Well, the mayor wants to speak. With you about the education initiative, Victoria said, linking her arm through his possessively. You know how important tonight is for the foundation. Foundation? Zoe's mind raced. This wasn't just any party. This was some kind of charity event, and Nolan was clearly someone important. Of course, Nolan said, but his eyes found Zoe's. Give me just a moment. Victoria's smile tightened. Actually, we really should go now. You know how Senator Williams gets when he's kept waiting. Nolan looked torn, glancing between Victoria and Zoe. In that moment, Zoe saw the weight he carried, the obligations that pulled him in different directions. It's okay, Zoe said softly. You should go. This was wonderful, but I should head home anyway. Wait, Nolan said, pulling out his phone. Can I have your number? I'd love to see you again. Victoria's perfectly manicured fingers tightened on his arm. Nolan, we really must go. Zoe quickly entered her number into his phone, her fingers trembling slightly. As she handed it back, their fingers touched briefly, sending that same electric current through her. I'll call you, he promised, his eyes intense. I'd like that, Zoe whispered. As Victoria pulled him away, Nolan looked back once, his expression unreadable. Zoe watched them disappear into the crowd, Victoria's silver gown shimmering under the lights. The walk home, Zoe found her way to the elevator, her mind spinning. The doorman called her a taxi, but she declined, needing the cool night air to clear her head. As she walked through the streets of Manhattan, the evening felt like a dream. Who was Nolan, really? And what was she getting herself into? Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Thank you for the most wonderful evening I've had in years. Sweet dreams, Zoe. She smiled, hugging the phone to her chest. Whatever happened next, tonight had been magical. For a few hours, she'd felt like Cinderella at the ball, dancing with a prince who looked at her like she was precious. But as she climbed the stairs to her small Brooklyn apartment, reality set in. Nolan lived in a world of penthouses and charity galas, senators and foundations. She lived in a world of subway rides and student loans, late-night shifts and tiny apartments. Still, as she got ready for bed, Zoe couldn't stop smiling. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought, but tonight had been perfect. Her phone buzzed again. Sleep well, beautiful. I can't wait to see you again. Maybe, just maybe, fairy tales could happen in real life. Morning coffee and confessions. Zoe woke up the next morning wondering if the previous night had been an elaborate dream. But when she checked her phone and saw Nolan's messages, her heart skipped a beat. Before she could overthink it, her phone rang. Good morning, beautiful, came Nolan's warm voice through the speaker. I hope I'm not calling too early. Not at all, Zoe said, trying to sound casual while her pulse raced. I was just having coffee. Perfect. There's this little cafe in Brooklyn I've been wanting to try. Would you join me for breakfast? I promise it's much more low-key than last night. An hour later, Zoe found herself sitting across from Nolan in a cozy corner cafe in her own neighborhood. He wore jeans and a simple sweater, looking completely different from the sophisticated man at the gala. More real, somehow. You know, Zoe said, stirring her latte. I still can't believe you came all the way to Brooklyn just for breakfast. I'd travel much farther for the chance to see you smile, Nolan replied, making her cheeks warm. Besides, I like it here. It feels authentic. As they shared blueberry pancakes and talked about everything from favorite books to childhood memories, Zoe felt the same connection she'd experienced the night before. Nolan listened to her stories about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, nodding with understanding rather than pity. What about your family? Zoe asked, noticing how he'd skillfully avoided the topic. Nolan's expression grew complicated. My father built a business empire. Now he spends most of his time trying to control mine and everyone else's lives. My mother means well, but she's never understood why I don't want the life they planned for me. What kind of life did they plan? Marriage to someone from the right family, taking over the family business completely, living in the same social circles, forever. He reached across the table and took her hand. Nothing about finding someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who sees me as just Nolan. Secret adventures. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern of secret adventures around the city. Nolan would pick her up after work, and they'd explore places he'd never been despite living in New York his entire life. Street food vendors in Chinatown, jazz clubs in Harlem, art installations in Queens. I can't believe you've never had a real New York hot dog, Zoe laughed as they sat on a bench in Central Park, mustard dripping down Nolan's chin. My usual lunch meetings don't typically involve food trucks, he admitted, wiping his face with a napkin. This is infinitely better. Their relationship deepened with each shared experience. Nolan told her about the pressure he felt to live up to his father's expectations, about board meetings where he was treated like a child despite building a multi-billion-dollar company. Zoe shared her dreams of curating her own exhibition someday, her fear that she wasn't talented enough to make it in the competitive art world. You have something most people in my world don't, Nolan said one evening as they walked along the Brooklyn Bridge. Passion. Real, genuine passion for what you do. That's worth more than all the connections and money in the world. Easy for someone with connections and money to say, Zoe teased but gently. Trust me, I know the difference. I've spent my whole life around people who only care about what I can do for them. You're the first person who seems to like me for who I am, not what I have. The first storm. Their peaceful bubble began to crack when paparazzi photos surfaced online. Someone had taken pictures of them at the jazz club, and suddenly Zoe found herself identified as mystery woman with tech billionaire Nolan Richards. She stared at her phone in the gallery's break room, reading headlines like Billionaire's New Love Interest and From Rags to Riches Romance. The comments were brutal, calling her a gold digger, questioning what someone like Nolan could possibly see in her. Zoe, there are photographers outside, her co-worker Emma said, peeking through the gallery's front window. Like, a lot of them. Nolan arrived within an hour, having somehow entered through the gallery's back entrance. His face was grim as he found her hiding in the storage room. I'm so sorry, he said immediately, pulling her into his arms. I should have prepared you for this possibility. Is it true? Zoe asked, her voice small. Are you really worth billions of dollars? Nolan sighed, his grip on her tightening. Yes. My company, Technova, it's grown beyond what I ever imagined. I didn't tell you because I wanted you to know me first, not my bank account. Everyone thinks I'm using you, Zoe whispered, showing him some of the online comments. I don't care what they think, Nolan said fiercely. I care about what you think. Do you think you're using me? No, but then that's all that matters. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Zoe. I love your passion, your kindness, the way you see beauty in everything around you. I love that you make me laugh, that you challenge me to be better. None of that has anything to do with money. The words hung in the air between them. It was the first time either had said love, and despite everything, Zoe felt her heart soar. "I love you too," she whispered, standing on her tiptoes to kiss him. Meeting the family. 2 weeks later, Nolan insisted it was time for her to meet his parents. "They're having their annual charity dinner next Saturday. I want you there with me." Officially. Zoe spent days worrying about what to wear, what to say, how to act. Nolan took her shopping, insisting on buying her a beautiful navy dress that cost more than she made in a month. "You don't need to change anything about yourself," he assured her as they drove to his parents' estate in the Hamptons. "Just be the amazing woman I fell in love with." The Richards mansion was intimidating, with its perfectly manicured gardens and imposing architecture. Inside, the charity dinner was in full swing, with New York's elite mingling over cocktails and hors d'oeuvres. Nolan's mother, Eleanor, was polite but cool when they were introduced. His father, Robert, barely acknowledged Zoe's presence, focusing entirely on business talk with his son. "So, dear," Eleanor said during dinner, her smile sharp, "Nolan tells me you work in art. How interesting. Is that financially sustainable?" "Art is my passion," Zoe replied carefully. "I believe in supporting emerging artists and making art accessible to everyone." "How noble," Robert commented, his tone suggesting otherwise. "Though I imagine it's difficult to build a future on passion alone." The evening continued with subtle digs and pointed questions about Zoe's background, education, and intentions regarding their son. By the time they left, Zoe felt emotionally bruised. "I'm sorry," Nolan said as they drove back to the city. "They're protective, but they had no right to treat you that way." "They think I'm not good enough for you," Zoe said quietly. "They're wrong." Nolan pulled the car over and turned to face her. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. I don't care if they can't see that." But Zoe could see the conflict in his eyes, the weight of family expectations pulling at him, the breaking point. The final straw came at another charity event a month later. Zoe had reluctantly agreed to attend, wanting to support Nolan despite her discomfort with his world. She was standing alone by the bar when Victoria, the blonde from their first meeting, approached her. "You know this won't last," Victoria said. Without preamble, her voice sweet but her words like poison. "Nolan always comes back to reality eventually. He's had his fun with girls like you before." "Girls like me?" Zoe repeated, her spine straightening. "Pretty, naive, from the wrong side of the tracks. It's practically a pattern with him." Victoria smiled coldly. "His parents have already started planning his engagement party. To me, actually. Our families have been friends for generations." Before Zoe could respond, Victoria melted back into the crowd, leaving her reeling. When Nolan found her 20 minutes later, she was fighting back tears. "What's wrong?" he asked immediately, concern written across his face. "Is it true you're engaged to Victoria?" Zoe asked directly. "What? No. Where did you hear that?" "It doesn't matter where. Is it true your parents expect you to marry her?" Nolan's hesitation was answer enough. "They've mentioned it, but that doesn't mean—" "I can't do this anymore," Zoe said, backing away from him. "I can't keep being your rebellion, your walk, on the wild side before you go back to your real life." "That's not what this is," Nolan protested, reaching for her. "Isn't it? When are you going to stand up to them? When are you going to choose what you want instead of what they expect?" The question hung between them as other party guests began to stare. Zoe realized this was exactly what she'd been afraid of, becoming a spectacle in his world. "I need some air," she said, pushing through the crowd toward the exit. This time, Nolan didn't follow. The aftermath for 3 days, Zoe's phone remained silent. She threw herself into work at the gallery, staying late to organize exhibitions and catalog new pieces. But everywhere she looked, she was reminded of Nolan. The coffee shop where they'd had breakfast, the park where they'd walked, Even the street art he'd taught her to appreciate in a new way. Emma found her crying in the storage room on Thursday afternoon. "Okay, that's it," Emma said, pulling up a chair. "Tell me everything." Through tears, Zoe explained the whole story: the magical first meeting, the weeks of secret romance, the family dinner, Victoria's cruel words, and finally the fight at the charity event. "So let me get this straight," Emma said when Zoe finished. "You're in love with a billionaire who told you he loves you, who has spent weeks showing you how much you mean to him, and you walked away because his evil parents and jealous ex-girlfriend made you feel insecure?" "It's not that simple," Zoe protested, "isn't it? Look, I'm not saying his family situation isn't complicated, but did he ever give you a reason to doubt his feelings?" Zoe thought about it. In all their time together, Nolan had been nothing but loving, attentive, and genuine. He'd shared his vulnerabilities, supported her dreams, and made her feel cherished. "No," she admitted quietly. "Then maybe the problem isn't him. Maybe the problem is that you're so afraid of getting hurt that you're sabotaging the best thing that ever happened to you." That night, Zoe lay awake thinking about Emma's words. Had she been unfair to Nolan? Had she let her own insecurities and other people's opinions poison something beautiful? Nolan's perspective. Meanwhile, across the city in his penthouse apartment, Nolan was having his own reckoning. He'd spent 3 days replaying their fight, trying to understand where it had all gone wrong. His assistant knocked on his home office door. "Sir, your mother is here." Eleanor Richards swept into the room like a force of nature, her designer clothes and perfect posture radiating authority. "Darling, I heard about your little spat with that gallery girl," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I think it's for the best. Victoria's been asking about you, and the Pemberton merger would be so much smoother if our families were officially connected." "Stop," Nolan said firmly, looking up from his laptop. "Just stop." "I beg your pardon?" I said stop. Stop planning my life. Stop dismissing the woman I love as that gallery girl, and stop pretending that business mergers are more important than happiness. Eleanor's eyes widened at his sharp tone. "Nolan, you're being emotional. In time, you'll see—" "No, Mother. For the first time in my life, I'm seeing clearly." Nolan stood up, his decision crystallizing. "I love Zoe Martinez. She's kind, intelligent, passionate, and she makes me want to be the best version of myself. I don't care if she doesn't come from money or know which fork to use at state dinners. She has more genuine class in her little finger than most people in our circle have in their entire bodies. But the business will survive without strategic marriages. We're not living in the 1800s, Mother. I'm going to marry for love. And if you can't accept that, then we have bigger problems than business mergers." With that, he grabbed his keys and headed for the door, ignoring his mother's shocked protests. The grand gesture Nolan drove straight to Brooklyn, his heart pounding as he rehearsed what he wanted to say. But when he arrived at Zoe's apartment building, he discovered she wasn't home. Her neighbor mentioned seeing her head toward the gallery with a suitcase. At the gallery, he found Emma locking up for the night. "She's not here," Emma said without preamble. "She went to her mom's place in Ohio. Said she needed to think." "Ohio?" Nolan felt his heart sink. "When will she be back?" "I honestly don't know. She was pretty torn up, Nolan. What happened between you two?" Nolan explained the situation, admitting his mistakes and his realization about what really mattered. Emma studied him for a long moment. "If you really love her, you'll fight for her. And I mean really fight, not just show up with flowers and apologies." "What do you mean?" "Zoe's biggest fear is that she's not enough, that she doesn't belong in your world. If you want her back, you need to prove that your love is stronger than your world's expectations." That gave Nolan an idea. The hometown surprise. 3 days later, Zoe was helping her mother tend the small garden behind their Ohio house when a car pulled up in the driveway. Her heart stopped when she saw Nolan step out, looking slightly out. Of place in his expensive clothes, but determined. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice breathless. "I came to tell you something I should have said a long time ago," Nolan said, walking toward her. "I love you, Zoe Martinez. Not because you're different from other women in my world, but because you're exactly who you are. You're passionate about art. You care about people. You make the best coffee I've ever tasted, and you laugh at my terrible jokes." "Nolan, Please let me finish." He took her hands in his. "I spent 3 days thinking about what you said, about choosing what I want instead of what's expected of me. You're right. I've been a coward, trying to keep everyone happy instead of standing up for us." He dropped to one knee right there in her mother's garden, pulling out a ring box. "I'm not asking you to fit into my world, Zoe. I'm asking you to help me build a new one. One where love matters more than money, where authenticity matters more than appearances, where we can be ourselves together." He opened the box, revealing a stunning but understated diamond ring. "Will you marry me?" Zoe stared at him, tears streaming down her face. "What about your parents? Your business? Victoria?" "My parents will learn to love you because I do, or they'll miss out on having us in their lives. My business will thrive, because I'll be happier and more focused with you by my side, and Victoria can marry someone who actually wants to be with her." He smiled up at her. "The only opinion that matters to me is yours." The new beginning. "Yes," Zoe whispered, then louder. "Yes, of course, yes." Nolan slipped the ring onto her finger and stood to kiss her, spinning her around in the garden while her mother watched from the kitchen window, tears of joy in her eyes. "I have something else to tell you," Nolan said when he set her down. "I've decided to start a foundation supporting emerging artists and community art programs. I want you to run it." "Nolan, that's too much. It's not charity, it's business. You're the most qualified person I know for the job. You understand art, you understand community, and you have the passion to make a real difference." 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in Central Park, surrounded by friends and family from both their worlds. Eleanor Richards and Robert Richards attended, having gradually warmed to Zoe as they saw how happy she made their son. Zoe's mother walked her down the aisle, beaming with pride. Emma was her maid of honor, and several of the artists from the gallery provided music and decorations. As they exchanged vows under the autumn trees, with the city skyline glittering in the distance, Zoe realized that sometimes fairy tales do come true. Not because a prince rescues a princess, but because two people choose to build something beautiful together, regardless of what the world expects. "I love you, Mrs. Richards," Nolan whispered as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. "I love you too," Zoe replied. "But I'm keeping Martinez as my professional name." Nolan laughed, the sound rich and happy. "I wouldn't have it any other way." Their love story became the foundation's first success story, proving that when two hearts connect authentically, no obstacle is too great to overcome. The end.